Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 128. I'm delighted to welcome on the podcast Laura Bowen. Laura, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good,
I'm
thank you.
better now. I've had a coffee.
I like the wave. I think we need more waving at the start of the podcast. Well, yes, anyone that obviously the listeners won't know, we're recording this pretty early. So thank you very much for getting up and coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's taken me a solid half an hour to get my eyes open, but I'm all right now.
That's good. Well, as always, like we did on the webinar, we put out for questions to be sent in. And honestly, we've been sent so many questions. And I thank you to everyone that sent them in, by the way. I appreciate everyone sending the questions in. And we're going to do our best to get through as many as possible. We probably won't get through them all, but we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. But just start us off, Laura. I've not mentioned your current role. So what I'll let you do is just talk through your background, your career so far, and then just take us up to what you're doing currently.
Okay. I studied sports science at Birmingham University, or the University of Birmingham, and then did my dissertation at Aston Villa, like the same dissertation that most people do when they get the opportunity to work in football. Like, does sprint speed correlate with jump height? Everyone did it. I did it too. And then when I was at Aston Villa doing my dissertation, it just so happened to be when GPS first became a thing that everyone had to have. So like they needed someone that would sit on a computer, and I really wanted a job in football, so I said I would do it. So I worked at Aston Villa for 2 years as a GPS analyst, 2.5, and then moved over to Southampton to do the same role with the academy there. Did that for a couple of years, moved up to the first team to do I was a data scientist, but it was probably a really loose way of describing what I did. So I monitored and tracked all the performance data for the players, and then my role changed to be more of a sports scientist, so getting involved more in gym sessions, in rehab sessions, as well as still doing the data side. And I did that until January, and then I've moved over to the women's side, so I'm now lead sports scientist for the women's and girls, so from the under 10s up to the senior team, and I have 4 physical performance coaches that help me out with that.
Awesome. And I'm going to sneak my question in at the start of all this. So how do you find the difference between working with a first team compared to academy ages?
It's really interesting and different. So when I first moved up to the first team, I realized how different it was, because in the academy, the focus is on developing them as people and as athletes. So you will push them a little bit harder in the gym. You will take a little bit longer with their rehab because you want to make them as robust and the best that they can be. When you get to the first team and the schedule is so manic and they do so much, it's more about just getting them on the field. And that totally changes how you approach your practice. So if you sign a player who's never done a squat in the gym before, you probably aren't going to spend weeks teaching them how to squat. It's more about just getting them on the pitch and getting them to be the best that they can be and working their way around that, rather than when they're in the academy and you're developing them. And I think that's the same whether it's males or females that you're working with. It totally depends on the time that you have and how much pressure there is to get them on the pitch, how you approach it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'll dive into the first question. And I think this is a question that probably will resonate with a lot of listeners and coaches. So it's a really good question. I think this one was from Rebecca McLaren. So thanks, Rebecca. She said, how do you gain buy-in as a female working with male athletes? And how do you go about succeeding in that male environment? No pressure.
Okay. Okay. I guess I hope I succeeded in a male environment. I think I did all right. I lasted. I guess getting buy-in. So for me, I don't know. I've always cared. Like, I know that I guess it sounds a little bit like fluffy, but I've always really cared about the athletes, and whether that's getting them back on the pitch when they're injured or making them a little bit better. I've really cared about them. And I think it's important that they know that, not just as athletes, but as people as well. And then I think if you care about them, you can build a relationship. If you just ask them about their lives, I always thought it must be hard for them, because most people that come up and talk to them are just like, oh my God, it's you. And rather than, oh, like, are you kid? Is it like your son's first day at school today, or just talking to them as people? And I think building a relationship that way probably helped the most with my buy-in. And then also being able to explain why I was asking them to do something. Like, I don't get anything out of making them do a max sprint effort. Like, for me, I don't get a kick out of that. It's about conditioning their hamstrings, giving them a better opportunity on the pitch to not get injured, to be better prepared for the demands, and to be able to justify that with your knowledge. I think that's how I've got buy-in.
And I'll just extend on that, Laura, as well, because I suppose the other way of looking at it is, has there been any challenges that you felt as a female within the male environment that you feel potentially males don't, like, they don't go through the same sort of challenge?
So when I knew you were going to ask this question, I thought I've got to plan my answer here. I'll be honest within reason, and the reason that I say that is, so my brother said something to me a few months ago that has proper stuck with me, and it's that however hard you find it now, if 18-year-old me could see what I'd achieved, it was exactly what I wanted to do. I'd have been buzzing that I'd ended up being a first-team sports scientist in Premier League football, because that's what I wanted to do. I'd be buzzing that I'd got a PhD, because that's what I wanted to do. And so even though it hasn't ended up being exactly how I imagined it to be, it's exactly what I wanted. So regardless, like, I'm so grateful for that, for all the incredible people, all the lessons that I've learned. I think whether you're male or female, whatever age you are, whatever race you are, working in high performance sport is hard. Like, I think you're lying if you say it's not. It's so many hours, it's high pressure. When you're in it, it feels like it's life or death. Like, it is hard. I think, obviously, I can't speak as a guy, but I think as a female, it is harder. One of the physios in the first team said to me he would hate for his wife to work in this environment. And I think that probably suggests, like, what it can be like. I proper loved what I did in the first team and in the academy. I loved my actual job. I loved working with the players. I found the environment hard, and I did feel like at times I got overlooked because I was female. Like, if there was a warm-up to take or a gym session to take, it'd be like, oh, Laura, is there any S&C coaches in today?
Yeah.
Me. And I maybe that's because I'm me and I'm a bit shy, or maybe it's because I'm female, or a bit of both. But I did find it hard, but also I loved it. So, and I knew when I was going into it that I was going into a male-dominated environment. So there are things that, like, I knew I was going to get stick from day one. I knew that people were going to look at me and be like, the first impression would be like, oh, there's a girl here. And then it would be in that respect afterwards. But it was definitely harder than I ever could have imagined. But I've learned so much that I wouldn't take it away. And that's the best way I can answer that.
I think that's a great answer. And just to extend on that, what would you say, what advice would you give? Because there's going to be a lot of coaches, especially female coaches, looking at your career, like you say, working in the Premier League, like getting your PhD, doing all the things that you've done so far. Like, they want to do something similar. They'll be sat there thinking, that's amazing. Like, how do I go about that? So what would be some advice that you give those coaches that are potentially coming through uni now, or postgrads, or whatever position they're in?
I think probably the best advice I can give is, I don't know if this is advice, but I would say I'm pretty stubborn. Like, I decided that was what I was going to do, and it didn't matter like how hard it was or how much at times I was like, ugh. I decided that was what I was going to do, and I just kept pushing for it. I think probably the advice I can give is know yourself and believe in yourself, because I think in general in sport, it's not the environment where people turn around and say, well done, you did a really good job today. Or like, oh, you look like you need an arm around your shoulder. So you have to be strong in yourself. You have to know that you've done a good job. You have to know that you deserve to be there. Because even though people might think it, they don't always have the time or the awareness to be like, well done, or you deserve to be here, or you're part of the team. So I think be strong, and also I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you can tell me because you spoke to a lot of people. Someone said to me that in general, a guy will look at a CV or a job description, sorry, and look down the bullet points of things and be like, I can't do any of them, but I can do that one, so I'll apply. And a girl will look down a job description and be like, I can do all those things, but I can't do that one, so I'm not going to apply. And I don't know if that's a gender thing or not, but it's definitely something I would do. Like, oh, I can do all those, and I've got all those qualifications, but that one thing there, I've never done it before, so I'll probably not apply.
Yeah.
I would say just go for it. Like, I've interviewed people that whose CVs haven't met the job spec, but they've had something else the job spec hasn't even described or thought about that has made them perfect for the role. So I would say go for it.
I think that's great advice. That reminds me of a chat I had with Chris Barnes, who talked about having vanilla CVs, and people are having vanilla CVs, and you want to be that standout, don't you? You just want to have something on there, even if it's something that you don't even think is going to be that specific to the role, but you can help whoever it is above you or working in that team. I think that's the important bit that just makes you stand out that little bit, isn't it?
Yeah, something that's totally different, because I think whether you're male or female, everyone knows the sports science industry now is saturated. There's so many degrees and so many people graduating each year. Like, you could, like, for most job applications, I think if you had all the CVs that came in, you just literally split it in half, chucked half of them away. In that half, you'd have another 10 or 20 great candidates, and you haven't even looked at those CVs. Like, so you have to be something different.
Yeah, no, definitely. Brilliant. I think that was a good answer, Laura. Really good answer. The next one, we'll move on. You mentioned about GPS before. So someone sent a question about GPS. So how do you give feedback through GPS to a coach that just wants to know how a player has, how hard, sorry, a player has worked in a session or game? And they've gone on to say, would you use a multi-mechanical model, density metrics, distance covered? Like, where would you start? Where would you focus?
How long have you got? That's a whole discussion right there. But I would say, so I've worked with 4 first team managers, lots of different academy coaches, and now the Marianne and Lauren, who are the manager and the coach for the women's side, all very, very different in terms of their relationship with data and how hard a player has worked. So I think you have to understand the data and what it shows, and then the feedback that you give to the coach depends on what they're used to. So, for example, when I spoke to Marianne about doing the women's job, she was like, I know you're a numbers geek, and I'm just letting you know now that I hate numbers. It's going to be a good start. So with Marianne, I will use the numbers to inform the conversation, and she won't even see a report. I will just have the information, and then we'll just have a chat about how we can change and modify what we're doing or improve what we're doing, with an informed conversation based on the numbers. With Ralph, he's very much driven by things that he has done through his coaching licenses in Germany, and that's very driven on volume and distance. And then, so I would always feed back to him based on distance, and then once I had him in the conversation, I would then inform him about other metrics, the intensity of the session, but the buy-in would be what he most relates to. And for each coach, it's been slightly different. And I think it's more about how you understand the numbers and be able to tell the story to the coach in the way that they want to hear it.
And like you said, it's knowing about the coach, isn't it? Like you've given two really good examples there, because 2 quite different examples, but effective on both sides, just different approaches, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in the past I would have hung my hat on certain ways of doing it, certain metrics, different models, and then a coach will just look at you like, that means nothing to me, so do you want to try again? So I think you can understand it all and you can have all the numbers in front of you. You just then have to change how, like, the information that you get to the person in front of you.
And this might be a daft question, but has it always been like something that you'll present on paper, or can it just be a conversation?
I think it again depends on the coach. Like, some coaches want to sit and look at the numbers. So there'll always be a conversation no matter what. I don't think you can ever just put a report on someone's desk and be like, there you go, see you later. Some coaches really want to look at the numbers. Some coaches never want to see them. But I don't think, because there's always context behind it. Like, if you just give them a report, they might be like, oh, why has he run so much more than him? Or why has she done so much more than her? And not, well, they were modified today because they've been injured, or they were playing a floater in that game, so that's why they've done that. And there's a context behind it rather than someone just getting pulled out because a number says something.
Yeah, no, definitely. Right, next one. I think this is the one you're going to enjoy. What's your approach? I'm going to change the question slightly. So what's your approach to developing the women and girls setup at Southampton?
Okay, so that's a good question. But so I had in my head, give me a break, but I didn't mean that like, give me a break, Ben. What I meant was, so I've only been with the women's team 2 months yesterday. So it would be unfair of me to be like, this is how I'm developing the women. So before I started with the women's side, James Grant did this job, and with him working on the physical side, and then Marianne and Lauren developing the technical side, the aim has always been for this team of players to be a top team. So in the championship and then in the WSL is the aim. It's the project. That was what they were aiming for from the start. And when they didn't get sign off, they had to start from the bottom and work their way up. And they've done an incredible job, and that's the aim. They have such a good balance between making sure these girls are training not for the league that they're in, but training for the league they're above, or the league above that, but without saying to them, you're incredible players, you've made it, here's everything handed to you on a plate, like, we'll get there eventually. So they've had such a good balance, and James has done a great job of physically developing the players. They are so strong, like unbelievably strong and fit. And then the coaches, like the technical ability I've seen on these girls is unreal. So it's nice to come into this environment and know that it's a project that I can be part of. There's already like got the foundations. I'm built from there, and then it's nice to know that everyone is pushing for more, for further. I think we must be one of the only tier 4 sides that have full-time S&C, full-time physios, full-time coaches, and coaches, physios with unbelievable experience. So the project and the backing of the club is to push this as far as we can, and everyone seems to have bought into that, which is really nice, because if you have one project that everyone's working towards, I think it really brings you together as a team.
It's exciting as well, isn't it, that you've got that big goal as well of getting in WSL and competing at that level. And like you said, having the girls in the league they're in currently, but preparing them like they are above, like that must be, for you as a practitioner, that must be really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's been such a good experience for me to come from an environment where it's putting out fires, it's a game every 30 seconds, and you're like, oh God, here we go again. And you don't really have time to put anything long-term in practice and hold it there, because you're like, oh, we've got to pull that now because we've just suddenly got a game thrown in here. Or like, it's nice to work on something where at the moment, some of the girls' training sessions are harder than the games that they play. So in terms of preparing the athletes, you have much more space and time to prepare them, because the game at the weekend isn't worst case scenario. And then you've got like this long recovery period and you go again. It's like, okay, well, Wednesday was harder. So how do we program and plan for that? And how do we plan for next year when it will be harder, when it will be a challenge? And I don't know, it's just exciting.
So what's your, and you don't necessarily have to discuss this if you don't want, but what's your focuses then for going forward on the program? Because obviously being in the club for, do you say 2 months now?
Yes, I've been with the women's team 2 months.
So you've obviously had 2 months of seeing, like you said, the standard that the girls are at physically and technically. What are some key things that jump out to you where you can have that impact, you think, at the moment?
I think, well, for a start, the impact that I can have at the moment is that they haven't been able to train since December. So just getting them fit. So we've just found out we've got our first FA Cup our first FA Cup game back on the 4th of April, and we can only start training on the 29th of March. So the first impact that we've got to have is getting prepared as quickly as and best as we can from home for that first game when we only have 3 training sessions before the first match, which is almost unheard of in competitive sport, and just like the challenges that COVID's thrown at everybody. I think for me, the difference that I can make is that I've seen what it takes and what it looks like at the top level, at players that are best in practice, at staff that are total experts, and then like for the girls, they're pushing towards that. So hopefully I can help them bridge the gap and see what they need to achieve. They're already so far on the way and they've already had great people around them. I think I can just add something a little bit different and hopefully bring my experience from the first team to help take it to the next level. Hopefully that's the aim anyway.
And that's what I was going to say, because you were, and the whole Project Restart sort of thing with the first team, obviously you'd have been involved with that way back in whenever that was. So it's all a blur, but there must be lessons you learned from getting the guys back to those first few games after such a long period off, and like you say, training at home on Zoom and all the rest of it, to now the girls going through a very similar thing, albeit probably an even smaller time frame to actually get them in and get them playing again.
I think I was pretty lucky in that as a department at Saints, we felt like we did pretty well for Project Restart, like players and staff. As a group, we came together. We had pods where like 6 members of staff would work with 6 players, and it was very like niche, and like we helped each other out. And then when we came back in, like it was very like driven towards being prepared to playing again. And I think what I've learned from everybody there will help hopefully with the girls coming back in now. One of the things that we all definitely learned was you can run all you want, but there is definitely like you need to be kicking a ball now. If you're going back in soon, you need like the actual kicking load. We were just thinking like we're running everyone, they're doing gym sessions with whatever equipment they've got at home, but now it's time to put your boots back on so you don't get blisters and start kicking a ball around again. And it sounds simple, but as a conditioning coach, all you're thinking about is making sure they're fit and not necessarily are they kicking a ball.
There's a lot of factors that go into it, isn't it? From going from physically preparing to suddenly having all the load of a game.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, I'll jump on before I'm hogging all the questions. I'll jump back onto some of the questions people have sent in. So the next one being, what is an effective sprint exposure per week to guard against hamstring injuries, and how long is too long between exposures?
So this is obviously with any of these questions, this is just me answering from my experience on my side of things. I think there's not one answer to anything. I've definitely learned that, but from my side of things, what we found was really effective was as long as they had a max speed exposure at least once a week, that seemed to us to be enough condition of the hamstrings to massively reduce our occurrence of hamstring strains. Obviously, there was a lot of other things going on in the background, but we had one max speed exposure each week. And so we would not just track like have they hit 90%, but how much distance they cover over 90%. So when generally GPS metrics cover sprint distance, it's usually set at like a default of 7 meters a second. If you can hit 10 meters a second, sprint distance is covering anything over 70% of your max speed, which actually isn't that fast. Suddenly, if you're running at 9.9 meters a second, the load and the stress of that is so much higher. So it's not just can you touch over 90% once a week, but making sure you're actually covering the distance you would cover in a game in your worst case scenario over 90% as well. We would always try and get people once a week. If they hadn't got it in a game on a Saturday, we'd try and get them by Wednesday. Like usually on the Wednesday, we'd try and get them to make sure they'd had it once a week. The only time that wouldn't be the case is if we had more than one game in a week and they'd missed it twice. They've just played 2 games in a week, so then I wouldn't go and smash them with a max speed effort. But generally once a week, I think would be I've said it a million times.
Yeah.
That
So when he's saying about how long is too long, you'd say probably 7 days.
Yeah, I think you need to keep it within 7 days. Obviously, it's not the most important thing, the be all and end all. So if it goes over 7 days and they've played 2 games, they're knackered, their hamstrings are hurting, I don't think you then go, well, it's been over 7 days, so you have to do a sprint.
Yeah.
But I think in general, keep it within 7 days.
Brilliant. And then next one, what measures of fitness/strength do you use to manage progression to senior football?
None and a lot, I think. So I think in general, like, do you know the demands of the game? Like, you know what your players have to achieve at the top level and what their hardest game looks like. Progressing to that level, you need to be able to reach those demands. If you ranked all the players in the team based on a metric on their speed or their strength or whatever, I would guarantee that some of your best players that start every game would be at the lower end of that leaderboard. So I would find it really difficult to put 1 or 2 metrics on progression to the senior team, and it's more, can you reach the demands of the game repeatedly and robustly, whatever that is for you. There are obviously certain characteristics that you need to be a football player, and I think if you measure those and make sure that they are your benchmarks against what you think best in class is, so whether that's like your aerobic capacity, your repeated sprint ability, your strength, your power, your agility, I think if you have the benchmark of what you think best in class is and you can push towards that, then as a practitioner, you're doing a good job. But I wouldn't ever want to put a metric on progression to a senior team.
Yeah, it's a much bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Brill. And then we have had a few other questions sent in, and some of them were a little bit brief, but I actually think this one could work quite nicely because of mainly the difference between being with the guys, obviously in that environment, and then working now with the girls. Because the girls program at the moment, is that a part-time program?
Yeah. So they train 3 nights a week and then play at the weekend.
Okay, cool. So someone sent a question in saying, and I'll just reword it a little bit, but what is a working day like as a sports scientist within a soccer club? So you could obviously, I think another way of maybe looking at that was, what are the differences between being in that full-time program to the part-time program, but for you as a sports scientist?
Okay. I mean, for a start, I'm working from home at the moment, so that's a big difference.
Yeah.
I guess in the men's side, when it's full time, you and this is not just for me, but for the players as well. Like, your life is totally dictated by the schedule. So the schedule might come out on a Thursday for the next week, and on that Thursday is when you find out when your next day off is, or if you've got a next day off, and whether you're in the morning or the afternoon. And they're full on days. Like, you're working all day. We would always have a meeting in the morning, and in that meeting in the morning, you'd find out how mad your day was going to be. But full on and very different and never boring. And you never know when your next day off is going to come, so that always keeps you on your toes. But the good thing is, it never felt like clocking in or clocking out, and it was never repetitive. It always dynamic and always learning. The difference for the women's team at the moment, and obviously I haven't been into the training ground and doing training sessions because we're still working from home, except for rehabs when I've been on the pitch. But because it's 3 nights a week and a game day at the weekend, you have to periodize your week very differently to make sure you get what you need into 3 sessions. And also, for these girls at the moment, playing football isn't their jobs. They have jobs, they go to university, they are full-time mums, and then they come and train at night. So in the men's side, everyone's life is dictated by their schedules. They might find out they've got a Thursday off, so they'll go and play golf, or they'll go out with their families. In the women's side, if I put, even now working from home, if I put a running session on a Friday, but one of the girls is working until 8 o'clock on a Friday, and there's no way she's going to go to a pitch at 8 o'clock at night and start doing a running session. It's then how can we change the schedule to fit around their lifestyles rather than the other way around. That's probably the biggest difference for me.
Brill. And then just on that as well, someone's asked about, and again, I know this is hard because it's still early in your time with the girls, but any non-negotiables, or what are some of the most important aspects to focus on when working with part-time players? And I know you have touched on it there, that there's obviously different people are working jobs and all the rest of it, but is there anything else that you'd add with that in terms of non-negotiables?
Yeah, so I've been pretty lucky that everyone that I've worked with at Saints has helps me out and gives a little bit of advice and expertise. So I don't feel like I'm just going for it and hoping I'm doing the right thing. But when I first started in the job, I had an hour-long call with each of the players, and we talked about what their goals were, where they wanted their careers to go to, what they thought their strengths were, and what they thought the weaknesses were. They all sent me videos of them doing the basic fundamental movements. And then from that, I've picked out what I think their big rocks are, or the thing that they need to work on the most. And then based on their schedules and their times, try and make sure we're at least working on that. So you might have all these things that you want to work on, but what's the most important for that player? And can we get that in the week?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And that's been, when we spoke to people that are working with part-time players, that's been a very similar sort of focus, in that there is a lot of things that you do want to cover, but at the same time, you've got to pick out the important things. And Tom Noon spoke about it. He's with FC United ladies team. He said about removing the fluff, essentially. So the things that you don't need to prioritize at that time, getting rid of that stuff and focusing on the big rock. So I think that sort of echoes what he said, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think, like, I know I'm biased, but they are they don't get paid big money to do this. Like, they do it because they love it and they want to be the best that they can be at it. So they're sat there like, okay, what can I do better? What can I do next? And as a practitioner, that's so good, because you've got buy-in before you've even started, because they want to get better for themselves. And that helps when they're on a tight schedule.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Athletes like that are like sponges, aren't they? They take everything in, and like you're there to guide it, aren't you? And it's exciting because you can have such a big impact with players like that.
Yeah, definitely. It's so nice, and it's refreshing, because so they like some of them travel so far. They go on a night shift after they've trained. Like, it's mental, but they just work so hard, and you can't knock them for that, and it makes you want to work harder for them too.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we'll move on to some of the quick fire questions. So we'll go into these. So the first one being, who are some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Ooh. So the first person that came to mind is Bill Stiles. So he's the lead sports scientist for the first team at Southampton. And I would say he's been a big influence on my career, because it's not really a secret, I guess, that for the people that work with me in the first team, I definitely went through a period of finding it really hard and losing my love for it, I guess. He massively boosted my confidence and installed some faith in me, just by showing that he believed in me and that he wanted to help me learn and get better. He's so logical, and he has a reason for everything that he does. He expects a high standard, and I think for me that just helped, like, that we're doing this because of this, and this needs to be at this level because of this. But at the same time, if you're struggling, let me know and I'm going to help you out, because sometimes you feel like, oh my God, I'm in the first team, I can't ask a question because I should just know the answer.
Yeah.
And so he was a good influence on me for that. Frankie Hunter, I would say, is a big influence on me. So she was the first team sports scientist at Saints when I first started, and she was the first female practitioner that I'd seen in a high senior men's role. She just had this great rapport with the players on and off the pitch. Like, everyone respected her. And she's gone on to do like bigger, better, great jobs at Hull, at Everton, at Middlesbrough. Like, she's had a great career, and just someone that I always looked up to. And like, she's nailed this. She's got this balance of professionalism right. God, honestly, there's so many people.
It's always a hard one,
I've
this
just,
one, to narrow it
yeah,
down, I know.
I've met a lot of good people. If I haven't mentioned you, you were also a good influence on my career because I'm still here.
No, that's good. That's cool. And then the next one being, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
Not in a big-headed way at all, but can I pick two?
Of course you can.
So first up, I would say my strength is that I'm a massive numbers geek. So quite a lot of people that work in sports science or in strength and conditioning hate sitting at a computer, hate crunching numbers. Whereas I love it. Like, my background, or what I was really good at school and college, was maths and physics, and I was going to go to uni and do that instead. So I'm good at picking out trends and crunching numbers. And I think that has helped me out with my career when I needed to stand out from the crowd. I had something a little bit different way before data in sport was a massive thing. And then as a person, I think I care a lot, and it can be my strength and my weakness. You know, like, I can end up crying in the toilets because someone, like one of the players, has got injured, and I feel bad for him. But then I care so much that I put so much in, and I try and learn about each person. I think that's, I don't know, I like that about myself, even though I'm a bit wet at times.
No. I think that's good though, because it's easy. Players then see the personal side, don't they? And they can relate to that as well.
I hope so.
And then next one, and I always say recent on this one, and I know it's hard for some people, especially when you've been busy and had a lot on. But in terms of CPD, is there anything that you've done recently, and recently could be within the last sort of year or so, that stood out for you? So that might be webinar, it might be a certain podcast, it might even just be like research you've read. Is there anything that sort of jumps out that's sort of had an impact on your practice?
I would. So I have to pick this because, so I had a Zoom call with Georgie Brunevels like a few weeks ago, and she is an expert on the menstrual cycle, and she works with Chelsea women, and she's also a research scientist at Oracle. And we just had a chat through. So Dawn Scott introduced us, actually, which was really nice. And for me, I learned so much because I have come from an environment where you don't mention the menstrual cycle. Like, apart from it not being relevant to the players, like, it's just a taboo subject. You don't mention it, to working with athletes where it's very, very important. And I learned so much from her, and I've been listening to her podcast as well. And they've really helped me out, because I don't want to come in and just treat the female athletes like the male athletes and just think, well, everyone's just a person, it'll be all right. So I've learned a lot from her just in the last few weeks that I think has been key.
And for anyone that wants to know, Laura, what's her podcast?
Female Athlete Podcast.
Brilliant. And then finally, what would you say the best trait or the most important trait is to have for a coach?
Can I say caring, even though I've said like I don't know. I think caring about the players and about what you do. It can be a brutal environment, and I think you've got to love it and you've got to care about it. And then if you care about the players, you can make sure that your programs, the way that you develop the athlete, the way that you coach them, the way that you lead, is suited to their needs. And I think that makes you a better practitioner.
And then just also on that one, what would you say the most important trait is for a player? So players that you've had possibly the best success with, the best progression with, like, is there any sort of common traits that stand out with those players?
Yeah, the best players that I've worked with, the hardest workers, the most successful, the ones that have had the longest careers, have an intrinsic desire to be good players, the best that they can be, rather than You know, I'm going to do this because they told me to, or I'm going to do this because I get more money, or the fans will like it. The best players that I've seen are the ones that do it because they want to, because they love it, because they want to be the best that they can be just for them. So I think like an intrinsic fire, intrinsic like burn to be the best that they can be.
Definitely. I think you see that with the best players out there, don't you? They've all got that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Laura, this was superb. We've got through quite a bit there, to be fair. So big thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been great having you on it. In terms of people following you, keeping up with your work, like where would you direct people? Is there anywhere that you direct them to go?
I'm actually pretty shocking at social media. I'm better on Twitter than I am on LinkedIn. So yeah, I would probably say have a look on LinkedIn, have a look on Twitter, sorry. And also, even if I'm bad at it, I will usually retweet people that are good at it. So. And
what's your Twitter handle?
Not a real Dr. Laura.
I love that. I just wanted you to say it. I knew what it was. No, this is brilliant. No, superb. I think there was loads in that one. So yeah, thank you for giving up your time early in the morning and coming on. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see the progression of the program at Southampton. So we'll have to maybe try and get one in the future, a bit further down the line when you've actually seen the players in person, got in the training ground, and yeah, got plenty of work underway.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you very much for having me. It's been nice, and I didn't even feel like I needed a coffee by the time I got a couple in. So no, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Amazing.
Cheers, Ben.
Thanks, Laura. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.